Scalpel? Check. Hammer? Check. Vibes? Always sterile. Welcome to Scrub. Welcome to Scrubbed, episode 2. As promised, we are back, and we are back with Dr. Ned Amendola's recommendation of choice. I know you've all been dying to hear who he selected, and he selected Dr. Charlie Saltzman. So I want to say welcome. How are you doing, Dr. Saltzman?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the program with you.
And as always, we have Kinley, my athletic trainer in the OR, first assist in the OR, and first assist now on the podcast. And she'll be help keeping us honest and bringing up what she likes to call real people problems. So this doesn't seem like two surgeons talking to each other. So just as a reminder for all of our viewers, this show is invite only. So we're doing it like telephone game that we did in elementary school, meeting Dr. Amendola picked Dr. Saltzman, and at the end of this podcast, he's going to let us know who he wants us to interview next. But with that being said, that's the rules of the show. Welcome, Dr. Saltzman. Let's get straight into it. Can you tell us about what it was like to grow up in my heartfelt home away from home, New England?
Sure. Well, I don't know what it's like for everyone, and everyone's experience is completely different. I was fortunate to be the second of 4 kids in a relatively happy family with 2 parents, white, male, born in the 50s. I mean, basically, I hit the jackpot, and to be born in the United States, in particular. And had you been born 150 yards from where I grew up, maybe 200 yards, and were a woman, a girl, you would have been a black woman eventually, and you'd never have had the opportunities I have had. So I do think geography is destiny. I've looked back on my life and thought about how lucky I feel I was, and that's what it was like for me to grow up. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island. I grew up in a family that had very clear values, honesty, hard work, very much interested in doing good for the world, and that was all that was tolerated by my parents, essentially.
What did your folks do? What they do? What were they
so both my story is, as everyone is kind of unique. I had both my parents were only children. So we had a true nuclear family. We didn't have any cousins or uncles or aunts. My mother's parents were dead right before I was born, and we lived in their house. And my mother was I think, a really gifted, outstanding harpist. She was in New York City, top of the field, awesome. And met my father, and they got married. My father was a resident in internal medicine, and he went to Rhode Island. I think they went to Rhode Island because her parents died and they had a house to live in, and they started having babies. And so that's how they ended up there. My grandfather, the only grandparent I knew was my grandfather. My grandmother had a brain surgery in the 1940s, and that didn't turn out so great. She was around, but she didn't really function terribly well. And my grandfather was an interesting person for me, and I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. My mother had 4 kids. My father was always working. My grandfather was in the house occasionally, and so I was the first boy, and so I don't know if he gave my sister as much attention, but he certainly spent a lot of time with me, and I think a lot of the values and the view of the world I have reflects his life experiences. Yeah.
What did he take you to do? Do you remember, did he ever take you out?
No, he never. No. He told me stories about his childhood, which at age 7, because he was in a large family in the ghetto in Poland, Jewish ghetto, and very poor family, couldn't feed him. So at age 7, he went to work for another family. And and then around age 17, I think he worked for a tailor, so he learned how to be a tailor, and around that age, he because the Russian army was conscripting everybody, or they had pogroms and killing everybody, but he got out and he went to England and the United States, and he loved the United States. He loved the Statue of Liberty. It meant tremendous amount to him. And but ironically, to me at least, he was anti-capitalism. He was a card-carrying communist. I think he inculcated me very early to think that business was bad, and that your goal in this world should not be to care about that, and you should care about equality and justice and those kinds of things. Um, he wasn't the easiest guy to have as a grandfather, I would guess, but he was the only grandparent I knew, and I spent time with him, quite a bit of time with him, and he always, would talk to me about what was important to him, at least.
You,
So
you ever found
that
it?
shaped me. I'm sure that shaped me.
Have you ever found it interesting that both you and your father became doctors? My guess is you and your father were largely around him a lot.
Oh, my father for sure, and for my father's values were very clear. You know, and it's almost a joke in a way for a Jewish kid, but you could become a doctor or a lawyer if you're not as smart as a doctor, or an engineer if you're a little bit nerdy. But basically, but really the issue was you should have a profession that was interesting to you, and you could do some good in the world. That was it.
Yeah.
And so as much as everybody, and I was brought up in a world that is unknown to my grandfather, where I had no wants. I went to private schools because my parents valued education. I had an easy, almost too easy life in many ways, and and it was clear to me though that the values that they had ultimately became the values that I had, despite thinking differently, maybe through my adolescence and stuff. Yeah.
That's a teenage rite of passage to claim that you're doing something different and to
Well,
realize you were them all along.
that was for me more than anyone. Like, just because I decided definitely not going to become a doctor. Like that's just copycat
Little did you know.
behavior. Yeah, right. Copycat behavior, and yeah. So that's my upbringing.
So, what was it like having dad be a doc? I mean, do you remember him
Yeah.
being on call? Do you remember, like, man,
Oh
I
yeah.
wish, because I mean, I have children. I think about this all the time. Like, what's it like having a dad that's doc?
Well, I don't know what it's like having you as a dad, but I can tell you, my father was a pretty serious man, uh, and loved his work. Truly loved his work. He thought he was a detective. He would come home and go, "Today I had a tough, problem to solve or something," and but he was on call all the time. So that was an era where he was in solo practice for most of his life, and he was on call essentially all the time, and he was essentially never around. Um, uh, and I don't really know if he wanted to have kids or even knew he had kids. I mean, like he sort of woke, he's like, fine, that's fine, but medicine was his life, and so for that reason, I felt like this would be a very bad path to be a father. If I and I suppose I wanted to. I didn't know better than to think that I wanted to have kids and be in a family. And I mean, there are a lot of choices to be made, and not sure that I was very cognizant of other choices. I just figured, okay, I'm going to grow up and probably have the joy that I thought my family was quite fun to be in, and have the joy of having a family. And but I was definitely sure I didn't want to be like him. Of course, I turned
What'd
out
you?
like him, but you can't escape your DNA. It's
So, what'd you
there.
want to do before you wanted to become a
I,
doctor?
I don't know if I knew. I went to college, was particularly. I think, very good at certain things before I went to college, and I wasn't that focused on like doing anything in college except getting through it, and so it was easy for me to get through in math and economics, and so I did that, and in college, and came out the other end, and felt like it was kind of hollow for me, maybe mostly because I didn't put the time in, but the but just take math econ as a combined area. What you end up doing is you end up making models of the world. That's if you're good, you may end up making models that people care about. And in my senior project, I try to make a model for the cost of what things would cost if you imputed the cost of the to the environment of everything that you bought.
Yeah.
Okay, which is now
Yeah.
it would have been a great career if I
Yeah.
followed it,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right? But
Yeah.
you were ahead of the
but I
time there.
yeah, I guess so. But so you use regression models. At the time, you'd use sort of basic statistical models, and you'd build these models, and then you'd have an output of some kind. And then you realize if you get into it, you can build. There's so many assumptions that you build in, and there's so many ranges for values that you apply, and you have a long equation with different weightings. I kind of thought, well, you could put anything you wanted into the model and get anything out of it you wanted. And I didn't see the value. So I came out of it without knowing what I was going to do. I thought maybe I'll teach physics in high school because I could, that's kind of straightforward, would have been straightforward for me. Or maybe I didn't know what I was going to do. And so my father said, become an actuary. I had no idea what an actuary was. I looked that up in the encyclopedia,
Did you like
and
have a
it's
patient
the
that's an
most
actuary?
boring
Or?
job I could ever imagine for me, at least. It's like figuring out the risk of a insurance company, and there are several levels. I don't remember. There were like 5 levels. You take tests, and you eventually, work for an insurance company, and you predict what's the likelihood that Charlie Saltzman is going to run over a cliff and die, and how much will that cost you? And so that didn't appeal. Um, so I was bouncing around, and one of my girlfriend from college's father's friend ran a bunch of health clinics in very poor neighborhoods of Boston, and he said, "Why don't you show up, and I'll get you a short-term job because we need some help there, looking at some numbers and things." And I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And so I drove to from Providence to Columbia Point, which is no one listening to this would ever know where it is, except they built there the JFK library after I was there, or they may have been building it when I was there. Um, and I landed in a clinic in a 100% African American housing project for a huge housing project on Columbia Point. And these people were completely separated from all of Boston because public transportation went through the Irish neighborhood of Dorchester to get to Roxbury, basically. So they had to cross a line where they were endangered. This is the early 70s, mid
Yeah.
70s. They were actually endangered. So they were stuck there. The intergenerational gap, meaning the average girl gave birth at age 13 in that neighborhood. They were dirt poor, drug addicted, mother, grandmother housing, bringing up all the kids, no fathers around that I saw in clinic. I wasn't really in clinic. I was just doing helping them out. And they gave me a couple of tasks. One was to figure out why they were losing parts in the dental clinic. And I figured it out. And I went to them and said, looks like the dentist is stealing all of these parts because nobody else has an incentive. And he set up a clinic like 2 miles away. And, that was my first assignment. The second
Case
had something
closed.
yeah, second had something to do with Massachusetts Medicaid and billing and something, and it was incredibly horribly boring, and I had to wear a tie every day and a white shirt, and I hated that. And anyways, some of the doctors took me out for lunch a few times, and I talked to them, and it just seemed like that's where the action was at, and they were interesting. They were even though I think there were psychiatrists mostly who took me out. They were interesting people, and I said, well, I'd rather hang out with these guys, and they're where the action is, and that's what stimulated me to actually seriously consider medicine. And I went into a pre-medical program back at Brown, where I'd been an undergraduate, and then emerged out the other end and became a doctor. But for me, it was a
Yeah,
very circuitous, non-intentional path. And I think that's okay. I mean, it was okay. I think I learned something. I also reinforced my view that geography is destiny based on if you were born as a kid in those projects and you're a male, you're probably going to jail someday. And if you're a female, you're going
yeah,
to be a mother at age 13. And neither of those outcomes I just mentioned were even in the picture for me.
yeah. I
It's
find it
interesting.
fascinating. Yeah, sorry, Kinley.
Go on. I was gonna say it's interesting. Your father being a doctor and being, it sounds like his whole life was medicine. That he did not encourage you to go to medicine immediately after school. He said, "Let's do this
Yeah,
super boring job for you."
yeah. I
No,
was
no,
gonna say
I
the
think
same thing.
I'm sure he had given up on medicine. For him and his generation, there was no second chance, right? There was like one of the things I realized is I got as much as anybody who will ever be on this podcast, I got a true second chance. I got to go
Yeah,
back to college. I got to get into medical school. I got to do something. That can't happen in Europe. That can't happen anywhere in the world except for the United States. And I think at his generation, you think about him, he was top of his class at NYU, and at the time, there were quotas on how many Jewish kids could go get into any medical school, even in New York State. And he
yeah.
got in off the waiting list, despite being who he
Wow.
was as an undergraduate. So I don't think he thought for a minute that I had a shot at medical school. I am sure of that.
Yeah, I find
Yeah.
generational advancement absolutely fascinating. Like, it's very clear that your father, in many ways, was, I mean, going from your grandfather to your father, the amount of a hop that that took in one generation. I mean,
Uh,
your father must have never have slept.
maybe. And then when I drive around or live my life that I live now in here in Utah, uh, my parents never could imagine this life, and my grandparents, 100%, like living in one of the worst apartment buildings in the Bronx that smelled bad, was hot all summer. It was a tough place to live. Couldn't imagine the life that I have. I mean, not imaginable.
Yeah.
Just, and I don't know if that's going to be true for us. I can't believe that my grandkids, I can't imagine their life. I think it was a certain time being in the United States, you know, and just luck.
Yeah, yeah, there's no question. I find the 60s to be fascinating right now. I just bought a 1966 Mustang at a classic car auction. And to me, in a lot of ways, I think that may be where life peaked.
That was a
But,
nice car, and it has a heavy duty hearse shift in it.
oh,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
I know
yeah.
the car.
So,
Yeah,
one thing that you talked about briefly, I want to mention because I find it really interesting. Your mom was a harpist.
yeah, very apparently outstanding. And she went to Rhode Island. She played in the Philharmonic there, and played for. She played until she was 90 professionally. And the
Wow.
last places she played, it's kind of funny. She started out on in New York, and in fact, South Pacific was being written by Oscar Hammerstein, I think Hammerstein, but I don't remember who it was. But it was being written, and she was in the orchestra while they're writing it. So they'd write a script, and they'd play, and then they rewrite it, and they play again, and then she was on the road with them, and then in New York a lot. And everybody who played with her said she was outstanding. That's the only thing that was in her mind, though. I mean, she was 12 years old, decided she was going to do that and nothing else. She dropped out of college at age
Wow.
16 to go to New York, and so she was determined. Um,
Yeah.
and I was not a good. She tried to get me to play music. I, I
How
didn't
the
have what
fitting
she
to the
had.
grit that you had going from being in doing that stuff at the clinic to med school. You had that grit that your mom originally had too. She was not going to give up being a harpist.
No, she was something. She was determined. Yeah, and so the funny thing is when she got to be about 80, she had already left the Philharmonic. She had played all over, everything. And she ended up playing mostly like funerals at the local cemetery. So she thought that was very funny, actually. That's how her career ended up, always doing funerals. And she thought that was like perfect symmetry to her life.
So I just find it fascinating, like the amount of effort and energy it takes to transport a harp. I mean, the amount of dedication you must have and love for that instrument to constantly bring it. I mean, it just, and she did it till she was 90.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get a big station wagon. This is what she did, and you put a modified mattress in the back, and then you carry the harp out and you lay it on the mattress and roll it in and roll it out and take it. And so you need a harp mover. But I can tell you, I got sent away from at least one young woman's house driving up with a station wagon with a mattress in the whole back.
That was probably her father's doing, not her doing. So I can imagine that.
It's insane.
So, so what, okay, so you decided to go into medicine, which was awesome. And I really resonate with that story because I worked at an impoverished clinic in Costa Rica when I was 14, and
Oh.
seeing what it's like to have someone with nothing, being a middle class kid, to me, that just resonates. I got to do something. So you
Mhm.
start your journey to medical school. What did your dad say, and what was that transition to med school like, going from math and econ?
Um, I uncovered this letter from him when I started medical school.
Oh, that's
It's very,
awesome.
and it says you have a. I just uncovered this thing that somebody had made for me. It
Can you
says,
show it up to the camera one more time?
yeah, so here it is, and it's on his letterhead,
Wow.
Abraham Saltzman, and it's dated 3/10/81. So I think it's 5, 4, 2, 3. I think it's actually right before I went to med school. You have a real opportunity to get into a profession that will always be highly interesting and useful. And okay, my mother and he didn't have much money, and he was not supposed to give me any money, okay, because there were still kids that had to go to college. So he must have put a check in this, and I don't remember what the amount was, but it says use this as you wish, but don't mention it to your mother. Then he writes, I'm very happy you had a choice of schools. So it must have been right after I picked the medical school I was going to go to. So he was pretty happy that I ended up in that.
Yeah, it's funny. He told you to become an actuary, but my guess is when you finally decided to be a doctor, I bet he
Oh
was
yeah,
super, super excited.
He's
Yeah.
like, oh, thank goodness.
yeah,
So okay, so you
yeah,
went to where did you go to again for medical school?
yeah. So for financial reasons, I decided to go to the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, rather than some of the
Okay.
schools in New England that had made the mistake of accepting me. And actually, I went a little bit depressed because I didn't want to leave New England. I'd spent my whole life there, and it was great. It was a great opportunity for me to learn about a different culture, really, and to have an excellent education at an incredibly low cost, um, and um, and to go to a school that was about to win the national championship in basketball because Michael Jordan entered the day I entered. So there were a number of things that made it a great experience for me. And believe
Did
me,
you ever
Brown wasn't going to win anything.
did you ever see Michael Jordan play
Only
when he was
once
in
because
college?
you have to stay up all night, sleep out, and stay up all night to get tickets. And I
Yeah.
wasn't
Oh,
going
you
to
were
do
busy
that.
in medical school? You couldn't do that? Wasn't in your
Yeah, it was
forte there?
that was a choice. I guess I could have, but I did get a ticket to go to the first game of I think the second or third year he was there, which was when they were playing Dartmouth. And so
Yeah.
nobody wanted to go to that game. And so I got a ticket and I got to see him play for like half the game and they took him out. It's like,
Yeah,
The score was a zillion to one or something at halftime. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's
yeah,
amazing.
it was fun. Fun time.
What kind of piqued your interest in med school? What,
Yeah, so
because
so that's a good so I loved everything actually. I thought it was all I think um I think medicine, any field probably, if you really focus in and try to learn everything about it and it's hard. In medical school is not easy. I don't It's a lot of memorization, which I'm not gifted at, and all that stuff. But I loved everything. I thought I would be an internist. In the inter in my my pre-med years, I was able to take a few courses that were not. You had to take like two chemistry or four chemistry. I can't remember. Two physics, biochemistry. There was just a certain classes that you must take to get into medical school, biology. But then I had a little bit of leeway, so I got to take a course with a guy who was interested in something called morphogenesis, and I got really interested in salamander leg regeneration, and
heck yeah,
um, and they, which is just
foot and a-
incredible, right? Like, it's nuts,
foot and ankle
right?
regeneration.
Yeah, it's foot and ankle regeneration. It's just nuts. And so meaning I got so interested in it, I started working on sort of a research project. And then my year off between, the undergraduate and get the year you get into medical school, I had a year off, and I found a guy who was really interested in working with me. And then I got to medical school, and I immediately found somebody who said he was interested in working with me. He actually wasn't, but he set me up for spending 8 months in medical school at Woods Hole, in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, at the Marine Biological Labs, where I got to work with actual. Later, they became Nobel laureates on some aspects of intercellular communication, and I was really into it. Like, you're looking at somebody who really thought that would be their career, um, and probably go into medicine and then neurology, because there's a lot of nerve stuff going on. And it's funny how little interactions during your life can make a big difference, and people can say something that happens at a time that you're open to listening to them,
Yeah.
right? And I've had many people come up to me later and say things to me that, you changed my life. I can't even remember talking to them. And this one, I remember that at night, um, there were very few MDs at Marine Biological Lab. It's a PhD dominated place. There are a lot of Nobel laureates there. It is the place that the giant accident of the squid opened up understanding of how nerves transmit
Yeah.
electricity, and it's a place that's just filled with the smartest people in that area in the world in the summer. And so I wasn't really exposed to too many doctors because there weren't MDs there. But some guy from Britain who was an MD PhD who was working there at a bar, I think, said to me, as you stand on the threshold of your clinical career, are you going to just talk to patients, or are you going to intervene? And the light bulb went off because I was at a fork in the road. I'm going to become a basic scientist, which I thought was really hard but really interesting, or I'm going to become something else and intervene in my patients. And I had been a carpenter in high school and part of college, and so I opened myself up to the potential of looking at other fields. But until then, I was a lock on following my father into internal medicine and doing research, and I loved it. I thought it was really interesting, but I didn't think I could have the same impact.
You ever thought that that guy in the bar was planted there to intervene upon your life?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good question. He wasn't planted there, but these things happen. These moments happen in everyone's life. It's a window, and you have to be open to that. to that. And I was apparently open at that moment. And then I went to England as a rotation. I knew I wasn't going to do OBGYN. And there was a rotation in England. I thought, oh, that sounds great. Those guys know how to drink and play snooker and all this stuff. I go there. Well, I don't want to deliver babies anyways, and that's not going to be my thing. And I knew that. Okay, so this is one rotation our medical school had in England. I went there, and I'm in at some small hospital at night, and just living in this hospital, and the only thing going on at night was trauma. It was basically an orthopedic, and so I would go to the OR with this guy, and Sir William Bunting, and he took me under his wing to have me stay for a couple extra weeks, and it just became obvious to me that this was something that was easy for me to understand,
Yeah.
native to my abilities, and would be a enjoyable career, enjoyable thing to do for people. So that's how I ended up in this. But I would say that staying open to opportunities throughout your life. Now you're at a certain point, Steve, and many things are going to come your way, and you either will see them or you won't see them. They may see you, and you don't see them. Uh, I think that's a good way to sort of navigate your way through this world.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. No one really gives you advice when you start medical school. It's just, well, you can do anything. You can be a pediatric immunologist. But I wish what someone would say is, you will know where you belong when you find it. The
Yeah.
first day I showed up on the orthopedics rotation, that's where I belonged.
Yeah,
There
you
was never
you
any
knew it
other question.
instinctively, right? You just
Yeah.
instinctively understood. But you could have missed being in orthopedics because they might have
Yeah.
said you have to be assigned to one of these five subspecialties: ENT, urology, orthopedics, whatever
Yeah.
they are, and you would have missed it completely. And being an ENT and doing the kind of work that they generally do might not have been of um, any interest to you, or ophthalmology.
Yeah.
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 So,
It's so
so
true. It's so true.
yeah. I think I got extremely lucky, I believe, in finding this field. This field is as right now is as good a field as any field. You can do more for people than almost any field, um, and you can really change people's lives. Oh, and it's not that everybody you change, but most of the people who you treat, if you treat them well. Even if you don't treat them and you explain things well and you explain why they can't be treated, you can have a very big impact on the world around you.
Yeah, it's truly is an amazing field. So, in terms of residency, I know you then went to University of Michigan. Can you talk a little bit about your residency? And one thing I'd like, with how many residents you train, one thing I thought that'd be interesting to hear about is how it's changed.
Oh, well, yeah, okay, that's I went to the University of Michigan. The year I went, it was supposed to be 2 years of general surgery. So let's start with that, every other night call. And it's
Oh.
like a ray of light happened in the middle of my residency, first 2 years, where they said, no, we're changing it to 1 year. Can you believe it? And it's now for 3 months of that year, you're every other night call or doing neurosurgery or something like that. But for the other 9 months, you're on orthopedics every third night, which like is a huge difference. It's a huge difference.
It's a
Um,
miracle.
yeah, it's a miracle because you actually might be awake occasionally. And uh, yeah, and every other night call, for those who don't know, it means you go in at 6 in the morning or earlier, and you leave at 6 p.m. or later the next day, and then you show
Yeah.
up the next morning at 5:30 or 6 a.m. And that was a weird time. I mean, it was what we expected. We never saw an attending in the hospital at night or on weekends. Never, ever saw one. When you were on an intern and you were the intern for surgery subspecialties in the emergency room, you were responsible for everybody who came in with any surgical indication. Now that's crazy stuff, okay? And and anyways, that's the way it was across country. And when I went to University of Michigan, I thought it was one of the best surgical training programs in the country. That's why I went there. I wanted to have an exceptional training. It had a great reputation and it probably deserved it. Uh, the and to give the audience a perspective, if we were practicing that medicine today, it would be by far the worst hospital in the United States. And so a lot has changed. Everything's changed. Okay, we had wards of people in traction. Let's start with that. Wards of people with femoral fractures, men ward, a woman's ward, a man's ward, everybody in traction for their fractures. So it's just a different world, and we learned how to do balanced traction and all that. There were six
Were you
residents a
getting
year. Sorry?
were you getting daily X-rays?
No, you
And
would get an X-ray you would actually go by and feel their thigh and sort of jiggle it, and when it didn't hurt that much, then you get the first X-ray.
heck yeah.
Or so
I mean,
about two or yeah,
valid.
you get it immediately. You get it immediately, and you get it at a week to make sure it didn't collapse a lot. And then you would just wait. It took 6, 8 weeks before you could start doing
And
anything. And
were
it
those
was,
film X, were those film X-rays then?
yeah, they were film X-rays. Yeah, and they either were put in traction at the proximal tibia or distal femur sometimes, but even transmalleolar at the syndesmosis, so the tib fib syndesmosis. Those guys are really screwed. Had that because they couldn't really move. And then they had to, they had to have they had to defecate and urinate on a
Yeah.
ward next to, with 18 other guys, 17 other guys on the ward. It was a miserable thing for everybody.
So for
Yeah,
so
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 that
for the
was where we
viewers,
started. Yeah,
so for
sorry.
the viewers to talk about talk about what a nail looks like now versus someone staying in the hospital for 2 months getting an X-ray, like when their thigh is jiggly.
Yeah, no, it's just unthinkable. In fact, I recently got an image of the first nails that we got. We got these nails, and so the University of Michigan was a little bit behind maybe the rest of the country or contemporaneous. It certainly wasn't ahead. U Washington was ahead by 7 years or something using nails, and the nails that we used, by the way, were at first they were straight nails, which is a
Yeah.
problem. Okay, and then and they had no targeting system, proximally or distally, right? And so you got to radiate, and then there were very early fluoroscopic units that were spraying radiation everywhere. So there was it's an interesting transition, learning how to get. And we got all those. By the end of my residency, there were no people in traction, so except for kids, because at that
Yeah.
point they didn't have flexible nails and stuff. But anyways, the residency itself was 6 residents a year. There were no fellows. Think about that. There was a specialist in hand. There was a specialist on the faculty in hand, I should say, and then later on, and later in my residency in sports, and then much later, almost at the end, was a trauma specialist faculty member. So everybody, all the faculty did almost and children's. Peds was separated. Okay, so the Peds had cleaved off early. I think Hand had also cleaved off pretty definitively, and the people who practiced Hand and Peds were just doing that. But almost everybody else did everything. One of our faculty members, Herb Koffer, did pediatrics. He did trauma. Everybody did trauma. He did total joints. He's very much involved in total joints. And he wrote the chapter on spine trauma and how to treat spine trauma in Rockwood and Green to give you a sense of an average practice of an
Okay.
average academic. And they didn't come in at night. Um, I mean, that's just the way it was. So somewhere in the 90s, there was a big lawsuit in New York, and it changed everything about, I think it was a person's name might have, I've forgotten the person's name, but there was a woman, a girl who, younger lady who went to a hospital and got terrible treatment, and supposedly got terrible treatment at one of the hospitals in New York because it was resident run. And then there was a decision by the federal government that any hospitals that are receiving federal money for residencies have to have supervision for the
Yeah.
critical parts of the care, and things change. But when I trained, that wasn't the case, and I think the care was not great. Okay, it's just I mean, I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, those were the days." Yeah, you don't want to be a patient at a hospital that's completely resident run, where a first year resident is making the decision whether you get surgery, and a third year is doing it, and the fifth year is on call to cover if the third year gets in trouble. You don't want to be in a hospital where when I called one of my attendings up and went down the list of a child that had four extremity trauma, go down the entire list at 9 o'clock at night, and I hear, "Okay, proceed." And then at 7 or 8 in the morning, he walks in, signs the forms, looks at the X-ray, gives me hell about one of the four limbs. I should have used an intermedullary rod for the radius fracture rather than a plate or something like that. And then he walks out. I mean, that is not good care. So that's where we were at that point in time. We covered the football team. We covered, all kinds of stuff.
Well, there's an expression: you never go to a teaching hospital in July, because that's when the shift over of the residents. So
Yeah,
everyone
that
gets
was true.
promotion.
It was. I think it's completely not true anymore. It should be
Yeah.
not true anymore, but maybe it is some places. But that's where we were at. But we got to do some fun things. I got to cover the Michigan football team my senior year because of my rotation ended up being October, November, or something like that, and I got to to do that. That was interesting. Um, so you went to Michigan, and Bo Schemblecker was the coach. He was an absolutely famous coach.
Yeah,
Um,
I would have killed to meet Bo. I frequently play the team speech for my various staff members and
really?
associates.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yes.
just
Oh yes.
Oh, all right. Well, he was the most intense human being. Um, the most intense. So first of all, as a resident covering it, you think you're a big guy. You're covering the football team, but really what you are is you're the person in the stadium most likely to leave the stadium if somebody gets injured, to take the player to the emergency room, get them through the emergency room as quickly as possible because you know everybody, and maybe get them back to play the rest of the game.
yeah,
That is your real role, okay? But you don't
yeah.
realize that. You go into the locker room and you go into, you're going every day after the practices, checking on everybody, feeling self-important. I was feeling self-important. Um, but Bo was something else. And this is public knowledge. He had a cabbage, and then he had a second cabbage, and he recovered from that. And then the next season he's out there, and I can tell you he didn't stop being who he was. I can remember a time when Wisconsin was ahead 10-0. No, Michigan was ahead of Wisconsin 10-0 at the halftime. And the locker room was set up there was an arch, and the players would go through, and to one room, the medical staff could not go through that arch. You could stand at the arch and look in at the players and the coach talking to them at halftime, but you couldn't cross a line. There was an invisible line. You weren't allowed in. And I'm watching Bo, and they would all set up in a known position. I think the offensive line was kneeling in front of him, and then defensive line right behind it. Everybody had their position. No, it wasn't random. And he goes to the biggest guy on the offensive line, grabs him and throws him on the floor and says, "You played like shit." And I mean, and he's getting redder and redder and redder and madder and madder and madder. Think about it. They're ahead 10-0.
Uh,
And he gets so mad. I'm thinking, uh-oh, he's going to have his third heart attack right here, and I'm supposed to take care of him and take him to the emergency room.
yeah.
He's going to die on me. I'm going to get killed by everybody in this. That was Bo Schemblecker.
That's amazing. But it's amazing that you covered that as a resident, just speaking of the
Yes.
transitions of, now it's the fellow, and it's just everything is
Oh yeah.
becoming so specialized. But to have those experiences as a resident, truly amazing. So did you
Yeah.
do a foot and ankle fellowship, or when did
Yeah.
you get
So
interested in foot and
yeah,
ankle?
um, I I backed into all this stuff. So my plan was Well, so I met my wife in residency. She was a OBGYN resident, and she graduated a year before me, and she's hanging around. And I was working for the university, waiting for me to be done. And in the fourth year, I, I decided, well, maybe we'll go back to New England. So my brother was working in Portland, Maine, and we'd grown up in the same room. I'm really close to him, and I thought, well, we'll go to Portland, Maine. Sounds like really nice place. And my wife was born in Norway, so I felt that it would be, as close to Norway. Probably broke off from Norway when the continents divided, and so that was my plan. Go to Portland, Maine. So I called up, and there was one big group there, and I said, I'd like to come. And they said, these days people are so specializing, and we don't really have so specialists, but we'd like you to do a fellowship. So my first plan was to do the shortest fellowship possible. So there was a guy in front of me who got a fellowship with a guy named Hawkins up in London, Ontario, in shoulder, and it's a 6-month fellowship. So I was thinking, oh, I'll go up and do that. So that was my plan. So I called Maine up and said, well, how about this fellowship? How about a shoulder guy? They said, yeah, we don't have anybody doing shoulder in Maine. We're happy to have you do that. So I sort of semi-lined it up. I didn't really line it up, but I had it in, and I had somebody called for me, and it looked like it was going to happen. And then I got a call from his secretary, and I'm guessing it was in February or something like that. And she said, Dr. Hawkins is going to go to the United States. He doesn't know if he's going to have any more fellows. So he went to start the Stedman Hawkins Clinic and didn't know he was going to have any more fellows. As everyone in the field knows, he had a lot of fellows, and that he was a great, yeah, that was a great thing for everybody that he came to the United States. But anyway, so I'm moping around my department, and somebody says, oh, I hear there's a 6-month foot fellowship in Seattle. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And so I had all the confidence in the world they would take me, which is stupid, right? And so this is kind of personal, but so I go out there for my fellowship interview. Oh, I go to my main mentor, and I said, I need a letter from you to get this interview. And he says, I won't write you a letter. What do you mean you won't write me a letter? He says, not unless you apply to this other fellowship. That was a year long, and I didn't really want to go to a year-long fellowship. That seemed way too long. Because everybody was a generalist, like who's doing fellowships? And so he says, nope, I won't write you a letter. So I negotiated with him. I do both interviews. And I went to the first one, which is with Ted Hansen in Seattle, incredibly famous guy, really super charismatic, big guy. And he gets me, and by the way, Portland had residents from University of Vermont coming, and so it was like privatedemics, I guess. It wasn't really an academic program. And he gets me in the corner of his office after the day, and he says, look, and he's hovering over me, actually. And I'm in this little plastic chair in the corner of his room, and he's like on top of me, looking down at me. And I want to go there because it's 6 months. I don't want to spend a year. And he says, okay, I don't want to waste my time training anybody who's not going to be an academic. Are you going to be an academic? And I lied. I said, yes. It just came out of my mouth. I looked down at my mouth, and I couldn't close it fast enough. And so I went
Yes,
back
sir.
home, and I had this other interview lined up about a month later. I went back, a couple of weeks later, my wife says, why are you moping around? You've been moping around since you went to Seattle. Yeah, I said, I lied to him. I can't go there. I really feel bad. And now, so so I interviewed with somebody else, Ken Johnson in Scottsdale, Arizona, Mayo Clinic, and eventually trained with him. It was a great match for me. Ted Hansen, long term, became a very close friend. He did offer me the spot, and I could say, no, I got another job. And I did a year, which was good. And then I was planning to go to Maine, and my wife, Ingrid's job there turned out to be a job she just didn't want. And
Yeah.
so she said, well, I want to go to where there's a woman, the first, I think, or second woman chair in OBGYN in the country, Iowa City. That didn't sound like Portland, Maine to me. It didn't sound like private demics to me. but we had a kid, and I was in love, so we went to Iowa City. And I tell you, I felt like when after I'd been there a little while, I realized I had joined the most amazing group of people in the field with the right values for me, um, and it was a great. I landed in a perfect place for me. Yeah, but I didn't know that. I was planning to bust out after 2 or 3 years, go back to Maine.
Yeah, so what? Yeah, so interesting. Someone said to me once that about year three you decide if you're going to stay or if you're going to leave somewhere.
Yeah.
So what was it at about year three? Like what filled your cup, so to speak, that kept you there?
Well, everything. So one of the things that the people, if anybody listens to this, one of the things that matters is that you join a group that has your values. You join a group that has your values. And I joined a group that, because it's in Iowa City, and it's incredibly inexpensive to live in Iowa City, and there are no rich people in Iowa City, there's no fancy neighborhoods in Iowa City, that if you're a doctor, you are going to do fine. Your kids are going to get a good education. You're going to have a house. You're going to be able to take a vacation. There's zero financial pressure. And because of that, I think it attracted people that had a certain set of values that were created uh, by the original people who started the department, Arthur Steinler in particular, and then the following chairs after Arthur Steinler. There's only two other chairs. Um, they had a certain value system, and the value system was what mattered was excellence and care, giving back to the field, and making the field better, making orthopedics better. And so it ended up having this group of people there, a small group, but of like-minded people. I didn't know that was me when I went. Um, I thought I wanted to learn how to sail uh, and be in private practice, and that would have been fine. That would have been fine. But the people I was surrounded were just almost to a person, remarkably special, and I felt like I was joining the best team. So
Yeah.
it didn't take me 3 years. I almost instantly realized that I was in a super special place. Like I would go to lunch or dinner with Ignacio Poncetti all the time. I loved being around that guy.
Yeah.
He was 79 or 78 years old, and when I was 38 or something like that, and
Yeah.
we became best friends. And Yeah, so it's an enriching group to be with, and I think that I was very, very lucky because I didn't know that it was something I would like.
Yeah, you guys were kind of like an all-star team of sorts. I
I
imagine you were like the plucky kind of rookie coming to join really an all-star team.
I was on, if you people don't know this, but I would guess in the faculty of probably 14 or so people. There are 5 Academy presidents, 5 ABOS
Yeah.
presidents, 5 AOA presidents. More importantly, there's 8 senior editors or editor in chief of our major journals. Uh, and I mean, the spirit of the place was to question the dogma I believe it would be fair to say that the view was that our job was to challenge the quality of care that we're giving and improve the quality of care. And in private practice, really, most of us have to say what we want to do is practice the standard of care. We want to do that. And in this environment, the whole concept was this isn't good enough. There must be a better way. And if you think about the University of Michigan Department of Orthopedics or the hospital in 1980s, had not anyone had that view that there must be a better way, we would be practicing horrible medicine today. But instead, because of industry and innovation and people measuring their results very carefully and reporting them and measuring their bad results and reporting them. We're in a completely different world, a much better world. And that was the view in Iowa. The view was we can really make this world better. And I love that ethic, and
Yeah.
it deeply resonated with me. And they gave me a lot of opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, orthopedics is, I mean, the ability to innovate for those who are truly interested in it. I think really the sky is the limit, especially at that time. There's no
Still,
question.
still,
Yeah.
always. There's always. So it's really hard to see. Like I didn't see the internet coming. Okay, I didn't see Google coming. I didn't. I didn't. I didn't see Amazon coming. It's really hard to see these things coming. I didn't see AI coming. You
Yeah.
can't see it until it's there. But some people can. Um, and even if you're not the visionary innovator, taking the so Arthur Steinler is an interesting guy. He started the department and he was chair from roughly 1918 to 1950. And at the academy meeting every other year, there's a Steinler award and a Steinler lectureship. He had a huge influence. And what he was a person who was, well, he was this very, apparently a very special person, spoke 7 languages, uh, and so was internationally known because he published around the world and made Iowa a very special place. But what he really did was he used um, um, organizational skills that he had and expectations to make sure that every patient was followed up routinely and reported on. And that's why many of these long-term natural history studies of just diseases came from Iowa, because he set a foundation and an expectation that our responsibility as doctors is not just to do the surgery or the care, but it is to report on which ones work and which ones don't work. Now, that ethic does not resonate through medicine, doesn't resonate through most of orthopedics, but was present there at that time and hopefully is present in many other places, um, and enabled by the technologies that we have today. His whole technology was 3 by 5 cards, writing down how each patient was doing, you know.
That was oftentimes enough. It's enough to get the job done.
Yeah, was
So
to get
so what
started.
was it? What was it like going from such an amazing place to Utah, and what was that like for your family? Where,
Oh,
Utah, correct me if I'm wrong, is where you spent most of your career.
yeah,
What
so
was
I,
that
yeah.
transition like?
Yeah, I spent 14 years in Iowa and moved up the ranks and built I think, a really good program with help of Ned Amendola for 5 years, where we had a really good fellowship. The 5 years I spent with him were probably the most productive research-wise, because we had such great facilities and we both were energetic and interested and collaborated a lot. And so I had a really amazing situation. Most people in an amazing situation where they have the top, they have a great clinical practice, the biggest practice you can imagine, they have a great fellowship, a great research program, would never leave. And I don't know why, but I decided that I wanted a new challenge. And I also decided, we had 2 kids, and I decided, Iowa City, they'll come visit us on Christmas or something. Their spouse will be complaining about coming to Iowa City. And then, but if it's Salt Lake City, it's a good chance that they want to ski or do something. So that was in the back of my mind, but that wasn't primary. Primary was to have a new challenge. Um, and, like, I don't know if that's for everybody. There's a movie that has a line in it that struck me. Um, and you may know the movie. Let me think. Harry Dean Stanton's talking to Emilio Estevez about Repo Man's the name of the movie, and he's watching a couple that's where in Beverly Hills in tennis outfits getting their Mercedes Benz repossessed and they're all pissed off. And this repo man goes in and repossesses their car, and he says, "Ordinary people always trying to get out of stressful situation. Repo man always trying to get into and stressful situation." I felt like I needed some more stress, I guess, and so I decided I was going to take the ethic of Iowa to a different place and the
Yeah.
methods that I had learned and leverage through a young faculty and build a faculty around that to try to be the top program in the country for education, for research, and for clinical care. Uh, and I thought it had the elements. It's the only job I looked at. It's the only job I've ever applied to. So it's not like I had any perspective on it. Okay. And I also got extremely lucky with a few things that I didn't recognize then that I now recognize to to be able to build something bigger than foot and ankle program in Iowa City. So that's why I went. And I've been here
Yeah.
20 years. I was the chair for 16, and we've had a good run.
Yeah, I mean, by all measures, you have truly put Utah on the map. So I find it fascinating how leaders have the energy to leave an environment that is probably perfect and to do it out of the need to create it somewhere else, because that's how we survive and improve.
Yep. And change is inevitable, like so. You can let it, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. So if you want to have you want to direct the current some way. So what I want to mention one thing which is really important. I think I got very lucky for in ways that I didn't recognize. So I ended up in a town that was growing, in a economy that's extremely good, in a health system that wanted to grow, and in an environment that gave the chairs almost complete financial autonomy.
Yeah.
And that's rare. In academics now, the deans all go, the senior vice presidents all go to the same courses and the same classes and hear from the same consultants, the same thing, which ends up making the chairs middlemen between a hospital system and the faculty, trying to somehow arbitrate between the two, do arbitrage between the two. And that's not what I had. I had a blank check. Actually, I had a red check. We were losing money every year, but I had the ability to turn it around and to build what I want and to keep the money to build more and more and more rather than it going somewhere else. And so in a growing economy, in a growing business, it's hard to lose. If you're in a place, any business, it turns out, and it's things are booming, you can make a bunch of mistakes and still do well. So, and I had that. I didn't see it. I didn't recognize it. I didn't pick coming here for that reason, but I had that. And we
Yeah, it's
did.
fascinating.
We've had fun, and we got an amazing place now.
Well, I mean, now, nowadays, and not just medicine and business in general, there's this, shareholder need every year to do 2% better, 3% better. And the reality is that, we're not thinking about the long term. What are we trying to build? And Kinley knows this. You got to spend money to make money. And I oftentimes write the check or ask to write the check because you got to spend it to make it, you know?
If you so in the academic world, it's rare that you have the independent ability to do that because somebody else wants your money and thinks their
Yeah.
program is better, and things are decided by committee. And you're usually, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, you're a minority on that committee. I don't care what committee you're on. So it's, there's a little bit of struggle in there for the for working in a bigger center. Um, but you and Kinley have built a great program, I'm sure, and are still trying to build. And it does take vision, it takes money, it takes commitment, and it takes willing to lose for a while and to be able to build.
So what? So we had talked a little bit the other day, and I want to hear your perspective on this because it's a really important topic. You being prolific in foot and ankle and doing so much for the community and for the field. You know, One, I want to hear about what it was like to educate people that then go off to become their own, entity in the field and how rewarding that must be. But something that's really important is how do you know when it's time to pursue retirement or at least non-clinical practice?
Yeah, okay. Those are a couple of big topics. I think we all just do our best with every trainee, and we try to. It's really like if you're lucky, you get to pick who you train, and that's probably the most important thing, or who you hire to be your partners, or who you hire. So spending a lot of time on the front end selecting your partners or your trainees is time worth spending. In fact, nobody spends as much time as they should doing the background work to figure out who these people are. Um,
Yeah.
one little tip is I do think people don't change that much when they're adults. And so you can ask yourself, when in your life are you exposed in a way that will tell what your deep character is related to work or related to something? And who would know that? And then figure out who the who is. And I figured this out for my hiring. And then talk to those people and say, okay, when this person was in a very stressful situation and you were in that situation, were you comfortable working with them? How they handle it? How did they treat you well? It's very easy to treat people well when you're doing well. It's not so easy when everything is going sideways. And and that's the character. Do they stand up, show up, work side by side you quietly, effectively, and so that's what you're going to look for. And it's hard with the residencies, in particular, because it's hard to get information, and even though you get all the information you can, you rank order and you just hope the people that you really want come to you. So that's that. The other end of the question, I think, was about when to stop. That is a that's a tough thing. So I'm incredible. I was incredibly involved in our field at every level, and I liked it. I found everything interesting. I followed. I didn't have a plan. I just if opportunities came up, I looked at them and generally took the opportunity to see where it took me and gave it my best. And by doing so, and by doing that with every single patient, giving it my best, I developed a great sort of clinical practice and great career. And then at some point, you got to stop. You got to at least stop cutting and seeing, probably seeing patients, but at least stop being primarily responsible for their surgical management. And you don't want to stop a day late. So you have to stop early. You have to stop earlier than you want to stop because it is
Yeah.
the best job in the world. First of all, everybody comes in your office and said, or almost everybody comes and says how great you are. What's better than that? Your wife's not telling you that, or your husband's not telling you that, your kids are definitely not saying that every day. And so that's a great plus. You're getting paid a lot of money, and it gets easy. I mean, it gets easier, right? And so,
Yeah.
what is going to stop you? And what has to stop you is your recognition that someday you won't be as good as you were. Um, Fortune 500 companies do not hire 70-year-olds to run their companies. Okay, they generally, if you look, they're in the 55 to 60-year-old range, and by the time they put 5 or 8 years in, out. And there's a reason for that. Nobody's brain is as good, or maybe not nobody, but most people's brains are not as good when they're 65 or 70 as they were when they're 45 or 50. For me, I recognize that the agility in the OR to handle anything that's coming at me was really fluid and easy when I was 45 or 50. and became a little less um, easy as I got older. So if problems happen, figuring your way out of the problem, which is part of being a surgeon every day, in fact, um, has to be uh, becomes a little more um, based on reflex motor memory when you get older, and less on just intuitiveness, if you will. And I
Yeah.
recognize that. And so what I did is I picked a day. I picked a year and a day, and I said, I'm going to stop on this day. And then I realized I had a fellow coming and share it with two other people. So I picked 4 months after that day because because it was, I wanted to make sure they came probably partially because of me. Uh, I,
Hmm.
I would guess, because of my reputation. And so I gave them 4 months, and I said, you can spend as much time as you want during this first 4 months with me or not, whatever you want. And then I was done. Um, Fortunately for me, my partners still want me to be available in the OR if they need something. So I said, I will do that. I'm not billing. I'm not seeing patients independently. I'll keep my malpractice insurance so I can just come in and honestly, they don't need me much. 5 times in the last 2 months or something, or 2.5 months. So it's very little.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm happy to come in. It's walking into an empty if you work 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week and this is what you do, the day you're done, you're walking into an empty elevator shaft. And so you got to realize you're not going to be happy for a little while. You got to work with yourself. You have to talk to yourself. Left brain, right brain. This is the right
Well,
thing for patients. You went into medicine to help people. You don't want to ever hurt anybody unintentionally. And it's really
yeah.
important you do it, okay? So I'm talking, I hope some, no, I don't think anybody my age will be listening to this, but if anybody is, or anybody has a practice partner who they're worried about, they got to get them out of medicine. We cannot tolerate somebody who is not practicing at the top of their game. It is unfair to patients. It is unfair to the profession, and it is not good for medicine. And so they got to get out. And if you look at the chart, the Academy keeps data on practice, age of people are practicing. And if you look at an commercial airline pilot chart, it goes up and up and up, and age 65, straight cut down. You cannot get on a plane at 65 and one day and fly a commercial plane. Illegal. If you look at
Yeah.
orthopedics, we have 90-year-olds still practicing. That ain't good in my mind. There
Yeah.
may be one or two that are still narrow enough and focused enough and just doing one little thing. But why? Why? Is it to
Yeah.
help patients really? And this spills over, just one last thing, this spills over to another thing what I'm struggling with, which is, uh, okay, I think I'm still as good as I was a year ago, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever you want. And I probably am. Uh, the longer I stay away from it, I won't be, for sure. Okay. Um, a lot of people, not a lot, a few people who I know I respect, who have humanitarian, which is the wrong word, but who are going to poor places in the world that don't have educated foot and ankle specialists, want me to go over and teach and train others. And if it's not good enough for here, is it really good enough for someplace else? I mean, that's the ethical
Yeah.
question I personally am uncertain about.
Well, I think, you know, well, one, I find your ability to introspect fascinating because you've just asked a lot of very tough questions of yourself that, to be honest, probably 98% of surgeons would never ask. Something would just kind of force them out, whether it be a life event or something like that. And for you to do that proactively is, I find fascinating. But one of the purposes for this podcast, as we do more episodes, themes come out. And one theme that I've certainly picked up on is like there needs to be more collaboration between experienced and new surgeons. There just does. Because no matter what, whether the point you made about how you relied more on muscle memory, exactly right. I mean, for me as a younger surgeon, a lot of times when I'm working through a difficult problem, it's kind of through intuition or creativity. And I could
Hmm.
see how that would evolve over time. And those things are extremely valuable and should never be downplayed. So the reality is just like in anything in life, the more diversity you have, the more perspectives you have, I think the team gets better. And I think you're exactly right. Like, we need to think more proactively about how do we kind of sundown surgeons who have had an amazing career, keep it safe for patients, but still give them every iota of respect. I'm a big believer that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's true.
No question. No question. I don't know how you incorporate that in the world. Like, as I look at different specialties, foot and ankle, if you get better and better, you probably end up doing harder and harder stuff. Um, Joint replacement, if you get better and better, everybody wants to see you. So you think, oh, I'll just take the easy stuff. I'll do all the primaries. I got a huge practice. And that isn't really what patients need. What patients need is the most experienced person doing this. And so, um, okay, so the system of reimbursement is twisted, okay, or is distorted by that, and distorts the value of the of doing the harder surgeries um, clearly. So it doesn't recognize it, and so that's why that happens, I think. And so we need to work towards figuring out remedies to that within each of the groups,
Yeah.
so that there's an incentive for somebody with the experience to do the harder things that they know how to do with somebody who's learning them, because you certainly don't learn everything in fellowship. But that's a structural problem we have. Yeah, I agree with that. Um,
Yeah, I see now why Dr. Amendola picked you, because it seems like throughout every thread of this conversation, patients come first.
Hmm.
And I know that sounds crazy to have to imply that a doctor should be thinking about that, but there are some that live it,
And you
and
are
you
true
clearly
definition of that.
well, I think if you are in any group, I don't care where you are, and you listen to this podcast, and your guiding principle, as much as possible, and I understand there are circumstances where this is not fully possible, but your group's guiding principle is every time you have a hard problem, who should take call? Should this person operate? Should we add another person? If your guiding principle is the patient care of the patient's the most important thing for us to figure out, you'll probably end up in a place that'll be sustainable, make you feel good about your group and what you're doing, and will enhance the reputation of the group and will bring more work to you and make you thrive. So I think that's our. It should be self-evident, but it isn't always because there's a lot of other pressures.
truly love and compassion is the compass that guides all, and doctors are no exception to that. So I want to ask you one question that I asked Dr. Amendola. If you could go back in your career, it's an important question for someone like me or perhaps even younger, and change one thing, or you could do one thing differently, or maybe teleport yourself back to when you were a kid and say, Charlie, don't do it this way. What would that be?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So well, for me, it's become clear. I had a sort of a prejudice against industry. That sounds weird, doesn't it? But I went to a place, Iowa, and I had a grandfather who was truly believed in communism. Like it's a beautiful idea, it doesn't work, okay? Um, and but he believed in equality, justice for all, everybody contributing to their best of their abilities. Um, and I had a father and mother who didn't really respect business. Okay, so that's where it came from, which is probably not translatable, generalizable to the country. But anyway, so I went into medicine with its sort of lofty ideals, and I thought when I ended up in a research world, which was Iowa, that it would be sort of a waste of my time and work to work on something that would be a company-based project, if you will, or a commercial product project. And somewhere along the way, I became very interested in total ankle replacement before almost anyone in the country, as it turns out. Although there were a few before me, and one guy was in South Dakota. He had invented his own implant. Nobody else but him used it. It's called the Alvine implant. And around the same time, Ted Hansen and I and one other very good surgeon from Florida started doing them. 1995, started doing total ankles, and we got a lot of experience. The other surgeon's Roy Sanders, and between the three of us, we got a lot of experience. And then somebody came up to me at a meeting, Jonathan Deland, who's from HSS, says, you know more about total ankles. He did a lot of research, a lot of laboratory cadaver work, looked at a lot of different design issues. And he says, I want you to help me design a total ankle. And I said, I'm not interested. And he said, well, because I thought it would take me away from more valuable things. And he said, well, I just give me a list of the criteria. And I gave him my list of criteria of what, take out the least bone, move like an ankle. It's pretty simple, right? Be careful with the soft tissues. I don't remember. The criteria weren't that simple, but it was pretty simple. And so he goes away and he calls me up and he says, I have a relationship with Albert Burstein, and he would be interested in helping us design an ankle. Now, Albert Burstein, I probably have his book right next to me, wrote a book on orthopedic biomechanics that after I went to Iowa, I read, and it became one of my two sort of Bibles. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. It clarified to me how to do research. It clarified to me how to think about mechanical things. I didn't have a real background in it. And I would do anything I didn't even know he was alive, and he's still alive. This was 1999 or something. I said, yeah, I want to meet Al Burstein. So I went along with this and became very close to Al and Jonathan. We designed an ankle replacement. It became a product of Zimmer's, and it's an extremely good product. Seeing patients or getting emails from patients 10 years out of something you designed, thanking you, and then pictures of them hiking in different places. There's nothing like that, okay? There is nothing in my life that's like that. I feel so lucky to have been able to do something that actually became commercially successful because it actually impacted patients' lives. It actually made a difference, okay? Not about the money. In fact, the money stayed mostly with Iowa. It's not about the money. It's just the feeling that you could impact patients across the world in a positive way was incredibly rewarding to me. I never would have thought that, okay? Never would have thought that. And so I would say for those who are listening who have a little bit of interest in innovation, want to make the world better, don't think it's about the money, because it isn't, because you won't make money on it 99.9% of the time, but you will enjoy the process. You will meet smart people. You will learn a lot about how the regulatory system works, how safety works, how products come to market, how all the complicated things that are involved that you've never learned about. And it'll be enriching to you as it was truly enriching to me.
Well, Dr. Saltzman, I just want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Now, having got to know you, I can truly say you are one of a kind. You are a gift to this world. I can see why Dr. Ned Amendola cares for you so deeply.
And speaks very highly of.
Thank you. Oh, it's feelings mutual. Yeah.
Without further ado, before we go, would you mind letting us know who our next person to interview, who we'll be harassing, is?
Yeah, so would you interview somebody from out of the U.S., or do you want to stay U.S. based? Okay, so I think a very truly brilliant and committed and wonderful person to talk to